You're probably using at least 3 products right now that wouldn't exist if one guy hadn't ignored every expert telling him he was about to destroy his company. Bill Gates made a decision in 1995 that Microsoft's own engineers said would cost them everything. They were right about the cost. They just didn't know what he'd gain. This is the story of the single choice that didn't just save Microsoft. It created the blueprint that Apple, Google, Amazon, and every tech giant you know today still follows. And it started with Bill Gates reading a memo that made him physically sick. May 26, 1995. Bill Gates walks into Microsoft headquarters holding a document that's about to change everything. The memo is titled The Internet Tidal Wave, and Gates wrote it himself after spending weeks doing something he almost never did. He admitted he was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong about the most important technology shift in computing history. For 2 years, Gates had dismissed the internet as a fad, a toy for academics and hobbyists. Nothing that would ever matter to real businesses or regular people. Microsoft had built an empire on packaged software. You bought a box, installed a program, and that was it. The internet? That was just a way to waste time. But in early 1995, Gates started noticing something that made him uncomfortable. His employees were spending hours on this thing called the World Wide Web, not for work. They were just exploring. Reading documents from universities they'd never visited. Looking at pictures from places they'd never been. Communicating with people they'd never met, and they were obsessed. This bothered Gates because Microsoft had invested hundreds of millions of dollars in something called MSN, the Microsoft Network. It was supposed to be the future of online communication. A closed system controlled by Microsoft, where people would pay monthly fees to access Microsoft-approved content and services. Gates had looked at services like CompuServe and America Online and thought, we can do that better. We can build a premium, controlled online experience that people will pay for. Except nobody cared about MSN. They cared about the internet. The free, open, chaotic internet where anyone could publish anything and nobody controlled what you could see or where you could go. One of Gates' technical assistants, a guy named Steven Sinofsky, kept bugging him about this. Steven would forward emails from Cornell University, where he'd gone to school, showing professors using something called Mosaic to browse the web. Steven kept saying this matters, this is different, you need to pay attention to this. Gates ignored him. Then in February 1995, Gates went to visit some customers. Big corporate customers who bought massive amounts of Microsoft software. And every single one of them asked the same question. What's your internet strategy? Gates didn't have an answer. That's when he started paying attention. He downloaded Netscape Navigator, the browser that had launched a few months earlier and was spreading faster than any software product in history. He started browsing the web, reading random pages, following links, getting lost in this weird sprawling network of documents and ideas, and something clicked in his brain. This wasn't a toy. This wasn't a fad. This was the future of computing. Everything Microsoft had built, every assumption they'd made about how software works and how people use computers was about to become irrelevant. The internet didn't care about your operating system. It didn't care about your desktop applications. It ran on any computer, anywhere, and it gave people access to information and communication that made shrink-wrapped software feel ancient. Gates went back to his office and spent 3 days writing. The memo he produced was 11 pages long, and it said, in essence, we've been building the wrong things. Everything we're doing needs to change. Now, that memo is what he was carrying on May 26th, when he called an emergency meeting of Microsoft senior leadership. About 20 people crammed into a conference room, expecting another strategy discussion. Instead, Gates told them that Microsoft was going all in on the internet. Not just adding internet features to existing products. Fundamentally reorienting the entire company around this new platform. Several executives thought Gates had lost his mind. Paul Maritz, who ran the Windows division, pointed out that they were about to launch Windows 95, the most important product release in Microsoft's history. They'd spent $300 million on marketing. The launch was scheduled for August 24th. Every retail store in America had displays ready. Jay Leno was hosting the launch event. And now, 10 weeks before launch, Gates wanted to delay everything to add internet features? Gates said yes. Not delay the launch date. That was locked in. But rework the product to make the internet central to Windows instead of an afterthought. This meant pulling engineers off other projects. Canceling features they'd promised. Working 20-hour days to build new technology that didn't exist yet. It meant taking Windows 95, which was already finished and being manufactured, and creating a day-one update that would fundamentally change what the product could do. The cost would be enormous. The risk was even bigger. If they screwed this up, if Windows 95 launched with buggy internet features that didn't work right, they'd destroy the most valuable product launch in software history. But that wasn't the crazy part. The crazy part was what Gates wanted to do with Internet Explorer. Microsoft had a web browser, it was based on Mosaic, licensed from a company called Spyglass. It was slow, buggy, and nobody used it. Netscape Navigator had about 85% of the browser market. Netscape's IPO in August 1995 would make it worth more than General Motors on its first day of trading. Every analyst on Wall Street said Netscape owned the browser market and Microsoft couldn't catch up. Gates didn't care about catching up. He wanted to win. Completely. Permanently. And he had a plan that his own business development team said was suicidal. He wanted to give Internet Explorer away for free. Not as a limited trial version. Not as a stripped-down feature. The full browser, completely free, forever. Microsoft's business development people pointed out that Netscape was charging $39 per copy for Navigator. This was actual revenue, real money. Giving away a browser for free meant spending millions of dollars developing software and then making $0 selling it. This violated every principle of Microsoft's business model. You built software. You sold software. That's how the company made money. Giving away software for free was what hobbyists and academics did. It wasn't a business strategy. Gates said that was exactly the point. Netscape thought they could build a business on browser sales. They were wrong. The browser wasn't the product. The browser was the gateway to everything else. Whoever controlled the browser controlled how people experienced the internet. And whoever controlled that would control the next generation of computing. So Microsoft would give the browser away and make their money somewhere else. On Windows sales. On server software. On development tools. On all the infrastructure that businesses would need to build internet applications. The browser was just the entry point. The executives in the room understood what Gates was saying, but they didn't believe it would work. Brad Silverberg, who ran the Internet Explorer team, said they were at least 2 years behind Netscape in technology. Navigator was faster, more stable, and had more features. Even if Microsoft gave Explorer away for free, why would anyone switch from a superior product? Gates said, because we're going to make it the easiest choice. We're going to build Internet Explorer into Windows. Every computer that ships with Windows will have Explorer already installed. People won't have to download it. They won't have to install it. It'll just be there, ready to use. And we're going to make it good enough that people don't feel like they resettling for an inferior product. We're going to hire the best engineers. We're going to work faster than Netscape can keep up with. We're going to release updates constantly. And we're going to make it impossible for Netscape to compete with free. This is when several people in the room realized what Gates was really proposing. He wasn't just changing Microsoft's strategy, he was declaring war on Netscape. Total war, using every advantage Microsoft had, the operating system monopoly, the cash reserves, the developer relationships, the retail partnerships, everything. Gates was betting that Microsoft could move fast enough and spend enough money to turn Internet Explorer from a joke into a genuine competitor before Netscape could establish an unbeatable lead. The meeting lasted 4 hours. When it ended, Gates had authorization to do whatever it took. Microsoft would become an internet company. The decision rippled through the company over the next few weeks. Engineers who'd been working on Microsoft Network, the closed online service, watched their project get effectively killed. MSN would survive, but as an internet portal, not a closed network. Millions of dollars of work was scrapped. The Windows 95 team pulled all-nighters to integrate internet features that hadn't existed in earlier versions. Brad Silverberg's Internet Explorer team went from 30 people to hundreds. Microsoft started hiring browser engineers from Netscape, from other companies, from universities. Anyone with relevant experience. The company's entire bonus structure changed. Executives who'd been measured on Windows sales or Office revenue were suddenly being evaluated on internet metrics. How many people were using Internet Explorer? How many websites supported Microsoft's internet standards? How fast was Microsoft gaining market share against Netscape? Some long-time Microsoft employees quit. They'd signed up to build desktop software, not fight browser wars. Others thrived. The company suddenly felt like a startup again, fast, aggressive, willing to take risks. Gates himself became obsessed with the browser wars. He'd forward emails to the Internet Explorer team at 2 in the morning, pointing out bugs or missing features in Explorer compared to Navigator. He'd test competing browsers himself, documenting everything Netscape did better. He wanted Explorer to match Navigator feature for feature within 6 months and exceed it within a year. August 24, 1995. Windows 95 launches. The marketing blitz works. Stores open at midnight to sell copies. People line up around the block. Microsoft sells 7 million copies in the first 5 weeks. The Rolling Stones' "Start Me Up" plays in commercials everywhere. But buried in Windows 95 is something nobody's paying attention to yet. Internet Explorer version 1. It's not good. Reviews are brutal. PC Magazine calls it a bare-bones browser for people who don't care about browsing. CNET says Netscape Navigator is still the clear leader. Nobody switches. Navigator's market share actually increases to 90%. Some Microsoft board members start questioning Gates' strategy. They spent millions developing a free browser that nobody wants. Maybe Netscape really had won the browser wars before Microsoft even showed up. Gates doesn't care about version 1. He's already planning version 2, version 3, version 4. He tells the Internet Explorer team that they're going to ship major updates every 6 months. Netscape ships updates once a year. Microsoft will move twice as fast. This seems impossible. Building a web browser is extraordinarily complicated. You're essentially building a mini operating system that has to interpret code written by millions of different people using different standards and make it all display correctly. Every update risks breaking compatibility with thousands of websites. Testing is a nightmare. Netscape's engineers are some of the best in the world, and they need a year between major releases just to make sure nothing breaks. Gates says Microsoft will do it in 6 months. Figure it out. The Internet Explorer team does something radical. They stop trying to build everything themselves. Netscape's engineers were purists. They wanted to write clean, elegant code from scratch. Microsoft's engineers were pragmatic. They borrowed code from anywhere they could find it. They licensed technology. They acquired small companies that had solved specific problems. They hired engineers away from Netscape and asked them how Navigator worked. It wasn't pretty, but it was fast. December 1995. Internet Explorer 2.0 ships. It's dramatically better than version 1. Still not as good as Navigator, but close enough that some people start using it. Especially people who already have Windows 95 and don't want to pay for Navigator. Microsoft notices something interesting. The free price matters more than they expected. Netscape charges $39. For most people, that's not a huge amount of money. But it's friction. You have to decide to buy it. You have to enter a credit card. You have to wait for it to download over your slow modem connection. Internet Explorer is already on your computer. You just click an icon. For casual users, the ones who just want to check email and browse a few websites, free and easy beats slightly better and paid. Netscape's leadership sees this happening and panics. They announce that Navigator will be free for non-commercial use. But they still charge businesses. And they still make people download and install it. Microsoft now has a strategic advantage Netscape can't counter. Windows comes on every new computer. Internet Explorer comes with Windows. Netscape has to convince people to make an active choice to switch. Microsoft just has to be good enough that people don't bother switching away. This is when the browser wars get vicious. Microsoft starts making deals with computer manufacturers. Dell, Compaq, HP, everyone building Windows PCs. Microsoft tells them, if you want favorable Windows licensing terms, you need to make Internet Explorer the default browser on every computer you ship. You can include Navigator if you want, but Explorer has to be the prominent choice. The manufacturers agree. They need Windows more than they need Netscape's goodwill. Microsoft makes similar deals with internet service providers. AOL, which has millions of users, signs a deal to use Internet Explorer as its default browser. In exchange, Microsoft gives AOL a prominent spot on the Windows desktop. Every new Windows computer comes with an AOL icon right there on the screen. Netscape's CEO, Jim Barksdale, calls these deals anti-competitive. He says Microsoft is using its Windows monopoly to force Internet Explorer on people. He's right, that's exactly what Microsoft is doing. But it's not illegal. Not yet. Microsoft's lawyers have carefully structured these deals to comply with the consent decree Microsoft signed with the Department of Justice a few years earlier. They're not prohibiting competitors. They're just making Internet Explorer the easier, more obvious choice. April 1996. Internet Explorer 3.0 enters beta testing. This is the version where Microsoft finally catches up to Netscape technically. Explorer 3.0 supports the same web standards as Navigator. It's just as fast, it has equivalent features. In some ways, it's better. Microsoft has spent millions licensing or developing technologies that Navigator doesn't have, and it's still free. Built into Windows. Netscape's engineers are exhausted. They've been working non-stop to maintain their lead, but Microsoft keeps matching every innovation within months. Netscape releases a feature, Microsoft copies it. Netscape tries to create proprietary extensions to HTML. Microsoft creates competing extensions. It's a war of attrition, and Microsoft has deeper pockets. By mid-1996, Netscape's market share drops to 70%. Still dominant, but the trajectory is clear. Microsoft is gaining. Netscape goes public with their complaints. Barksdale testifies before Congress that Microsoft is abusing its monopoly position. Newspaper articles question whether Microsoft's tactics are fair. The Department of Justice starts investigating. Gates doesn't slow down. If anything, he accelerates. He tells the Internet Explorer team that version 4.0 needs to be so good, so feature-rich that even Netscape loyalists will consider switching. Explorer 4.0 needs to not just match Navigator, but beat it. August 1996. Internet Explorer 3.0 officially launches. The reviews are completely different from version 1.0, PC. World calls it a legitimate Navigator alternative. CNET says, Microsoft has finally built a world-class browser. Netscape's stock price drops. Not a collapse, but a clear signal that Wall Street sees Microsoft as a real threat. By the end of 1996, Internet Explorer has 25% market share. Netscape is down to 65%. 10% goes to other browsers like Opera. The shift is undeniable. Inside Microsoft, Gates is vindicated. Everyone who doubted the free browser strategy now sees it working. Internet Explorer isn't making any money directly, but Windows sales are stronger than ever. Businesses buying Windows specifically want the integrated internet features. Microsoft's server products are selling like crazy because companies need infrastructure to build websites and web applications. The browser is loss leader for everything else. Gates starts thinking bigger. If the browser wars proved that giving away software to control a platform works, what else could Microsoft give away? Development tools, server components, entire application frameworks. The business model that had defined Microsoft for 20 years selling packaged software was evolving into something new. You gave away the stuff that customers touched directly and made money on the infrastructure that businesses needed. This was a profound insight, and none of Microsoft's competitors understood it yet. Oracle still charged for databases. Sun still charged for development tools. Everyone in enterprise software thought you made money by selling software. Microsoft was figuring out that you made money by controlling ecosystems. The browser was just the first piece. 1997 is when everything changes. Internet Explorer 4.0 launches in October. It's not just a browser anymore. It's integrated into Windows so deeply that you can't really separate them. The Windows desktop itself becomes web-enabled. You can use web addresses to navigate your file system. Internet Explorer's rendering engine powers help files and other parts of the operating system. Microsoft argues this is innovation. You're not just browsing the web. Your entire computing experience is internet-aware. Netscape argues this is the monopoly abuse they've been warning about. Microsoft is making it impossible to remove Internet Explorer from Windows, which means computer manufacturers can't ship Windows without Explorer. This forces Explorer on every customer whether they want it or not. The Department of Justice agrees with Netscape. In October 1997, the DOJ files a complaint saying Microsoft violated the 1994 consent decree by forcing computer manufacturers to include Internet Explorer. The judge issues a preliminary injunction. Microsoft is supposed to offer a version of Windows without the browser. Microsoft's lawyers comply in the most obnoxious way possible. They offer manufacturers a choice: Windows 95 with Internet Explorer 4.0, Or Windows 95 without any browser and with some features broken because they depend on Explorer's technology. It's technically compliant with the injunction but completely defeats the purpose. The judge is furious. This is the opening move in what will become the biggest antitrust case in tech history. But in 1997, the outcome is years away. And while the legal battles play out, the browser wars continue. By 1999, Internet Explorer has 60% market share. By 2000, it's 75%. By 2002, it peaks at 95%. Netscape Navigator, the browser that once dominated the web, is effectively dead. Microsoft has done exactly what Gates said they would do. They gave away a browser for free, integrated it into Windows, and spent whatever it took to make it good enough that people stopped using the competition. The cost was enormous. Microsoft spent billions developing Internet Explorer and fighting the legal battles. But the payoff was bigger. Microsoft didn't just win the browser wars. They established a template for how to compete in the internet age. You don't make money on the browser. You make money on everything the browser enables. Windows sales, server products, development tools, cloud services, eventually. The browser is the gateway, and controlling the gateway means controlling everything that flows through it. But there's a cost to this victory that Microsoft doesn't fully understand yet. The Department of Justice case keeps expanding. In May 1998, the DOJ files a much broader antitrust lawsuit, joined by 20 states. The accusation is that Microsoft used its Windows monopoly to crush competitors in multiple markets. Browsers, yes, but also media players, Java, and other technologies. The government wants to break Microsoft up into separate companies. The trial starts in October 1998 and becomes a media circus. Bill Gates gives a videotaped deposition where he comes across as evasive and dismissive. He claims not to remember key meetings. He argues about the definition of common words. He insists that Microsoft is a small, vulnerable company fighting against powerful competitors. Nobody watching believes him. The trial reveals internal Microsoft emails where executives discuss crushing competitors and cutting off their air supply. There are emails about pressuring companies to drop Netscape. Documents about making it difficult for users to uninstall Internet Explorer. Strategy memos about leveraging Windows to win other markets. It all sounds really bad. In November 1999, the judge issues findings of fact that say Microsoft holds a monopoly in operating systems and has used that monopoly to harm competitors and consumers. In April 2000, the judge rules that Microsoft violated antitrust law. In June 2000, he orders Microsoft to be broken into two companies. One that makes Windows, one that makes everything else. Microsoft appeals. The case drags on for years. In 2001, the appeals court upholds the antitrust violation but throws out the breakup order. The case gets sent back to a different judge. In 2001, the Bush administration's DOJ negotiates a settlement with Microsoft. The settlement is weak. Microsoft has to share some technical information with competitors and submit to monitoring, but they don't have to break up. They don't have to fundamentally change their business practices. By the time the settlement is final in 2004, it barely matters anymore. The tech landscape has shifted. Microsoft won the browser wars but lost the larger war for the future of computing. Here's what happened. While Microsoft was focused on dominating the desktop and the browser, the internet evolved past them. Google figured out that you don't need to control the browser if you control search. Google launched in 1998 and by 2002 was the dominant way people found information online. Microsoft's search engine MSN Search was irrelevant. Google made money through advertising, a business model Microsoft never fully grasped. By the time Microsoft tried to compete with Bing, Google's lead was insurmountable. Amazon figured out that you don't need to control the browser if you control e-commerce. Amazon launched in 1995 as an online bookstore and by 2002 was the dominant online retailer. Microsoft tried to build e-commerce features into MSN, but never understood retail. By the time Microsoft tried to compete, Amazon owned the market. Apple figured out that you don't need to control the browser if you control the device. The iPod launched in 2001, followed by the iPhone in 2007. Apple built an entire ecosystem around mobile devices where Microsoft had no presence. Windows Mobile existed but was a joke compared to iOS and Android. By the time Microsoft tried to compete with Windows Phone, they'd already lost. Facebook figured out that you don't need to control the browser if you control social networking. Facebook launched in 2004 and by 2008 was the dominant social platform. Microsoft invested in Facebook early but never built a competing social network that mattered. Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook. The companies that came to dominate tech in the 2000s and 2010s all learned from Microsoft's browser wars playbook. Give away the thing users touch for free. Make money on the infrastructure, the advertising, the ecosystem. But they applied this strategy to areas where Microsoft wasn't paying attention. Microsoft spent the 2000s fighting yesterday's battles. They kept improving Internet Explorer, but browsers became commoditized. They kept pushing Windows, but computing moved to mobile. They kept selling Office, but productivity moved to the cloud. By 2010, Microsoft was still massively profitable, but no longer the most important company in tech. That title belonged to Apple or Google or whoever had the most recent hit product. The browser wars made Microsoft dominant in the short term but complacent in the long term. They thought winning the browser wars meant winning the internet. They were wrong. Winning the browser wars just meant controlling the desktop internet experience. And the desktop stopped being where the action was. There's a twist to this story. In 2008, Google launches Chrome. It's a free browser, faster and simpler than Internet Explorer or Firefox. Google builds it using the same playbook Microsoft used against Netscape. Make it free. Make it fast. Make it good enough that people switch. Integrate it with your ecosystem. By 2012, Chrome passes Internet Explorer in market share. By 2016, Chrome is completely dominant. Internet Explorer's market share drops into single digits. In 2015, Microsoft admits defeat. They stop developing Internet Explorer and build a new browser called Edge. Edge isn't based on Microsoft technology. It's based on Chromium, the open-source project that powers Chrome. Microsoft spent billions of dollars and years of effort to win the browser wars, and 20 years later they gave up and started using their competitors' technology. The browser Gates said was crucial to Microsoft's future is now built on Google's code. That's the ultimate irony. But here's what makes this story important. The choice Gates made in 1995 wasn't wrong, it was necessary. If Microsoft hadn't pivoted to the internet, if they'd stuck with their original strategy of packaged software and closed online services, they would have become irrelevant by 2000. The internet would have happened with or without Microsoft, and if Microsoft wasn't part of it, some other company would have taken their place. Gates saw the future and turned an entire company to face it, even though it meant cannibalizing their existing business model and taking huge risks. That's the decision that every tech company now has to make repeatedly. When do you abandon what's working to chase what's next? How do you know when a new technology is a real threat versus just hype? How much do you invest in an unproven market when you have profitable products to protect? Microsoft's internet pivot became the model. Google did it with Android. They gave away a mobile operating system for free to prevent Apple from controlling mobile. It cannibalized some of Google's other products but secured their future. Amazon did it with AWS. They took their internal server infrastructure and turned it into a product, creating cloud computing. It was a distraction from retail but became their most profitable division. Apple did it with the iPhone. They built a product that cannibalized iPod sales but created the mobile revolution. Netflix did it with streaming. They killed their own DVD rental business to build streaming before someone else did. Every major tech company now follows some version of the playbook. Gates wrote in 1995, "Identify the existential threat. Pivot the entire company to address it. Give away or heavily discount the thing customers touch. Make money on the infrastructure or ecosystem. Move faster than seems possible. Ignore the critics who say you're destroying your existing business. Because the alternative is that someone else destroys your business for you." The thing is, this playbook doesn't guarantee success. Microsoft followed it perfectly and still lost the next generation of computing to Google and Apple and Amazon. Why? Because there's a difference between seeing the future and building it. Gates saw that the internet mattered. He correctly identified that browsers were the gateway to internet dominance. He successfully turned Microsoft from a packaged software company into an internet-focused company. He won the browser wars. But he didn't see that browsers themselves would become commoditized. He didn't see that mobile would be bigger than desktop. He didn't see that advertising would be more lucrative than software licensing. He didn't see that open source would become a viable business model. He saw one step ahead, but not 3 steps ahead. And in tech, one step ahead can make you dominant for a decade. But if you're not constantly looking 3 steps ahead, the next generation will pass you by. That's what happened to Microsoft. They dominated the desktop internet era but missed the mobile era, the social era, and the cloud era. They're catching up now. Under Satya Nadella, who became CEO in 2014, Microsoft has pivoted again. They've embraced cloud computing with Azure, which is now a serious competitor to Amazon's Azure. They've embraced open source, which would have been unthinkable under Gates. They've focused on business customers and recurring revenue instead of consumer products. It's working. Microsoft's stock price has quintupled under Nadella. That distinction probably belongs to whoever dominates AI, which is the current existential technology shift. And the race for AI dominance looks a lot like the browser wars. Multiple companies giving away chatbots for free, trying to establish market share. Heavy investment in infrastructure and compute power. Debates about whether this will replace existing products or create entirely new categories. OpenAI launched ChatGPT and dominated early. Google panicked and rushed out Bard. Microsoft invested billions in OpenAI and integrated AI into all their products. Meta open-sourced their AI models. Amazon and others are scrambling to catch up. It's 1995 all over again. The technology is new and transformative. Nobody knows exactly how it'll play out. The winners will be the companies that move fastest and invest most heavily, even if the direct revenue isn't clear yet. The losers will be the companies that protect their existing business models and move cautiously. Microsoft has the advantage of having lived through this before. They know what it looks like when a technology shift makes your existing products obsolete. They know you have to move fast and break things. They know you can't win by being conservative. Whether that's enough to win the AI wars remains to be seen. But the browser wars taught every tech company the same lesson. When the world changes, you change with it or you die. There's no middle ground. You can't wait to see how things play out. You can't gradually shift resources. You can't test the waters. You have to commit completely, immediately, even when your own employees think you're crazy. That's what Gates did in 1995. He saw the internet and committed everything to it. He made the choice that Microsoft could reinvent itself or it could fade away. He chose reinvention, and it worked. For a while. Eventually, Microsoft had to reinvent itself again under Nadella. And they'll have to reinvent themselves again in the future, probably multiple times. That's the real lesson of the browser wars. It's not that Microsoft won or lost. It's that tech companies have to keep making the same choice over and over, adapt or die, move fast or lose. Cannibalize yourself before someone else does. The browser wars weren't the end of anything. They were the beginning of the modern tech industry, where companies rise and fall based on their ability to see what's coming and bet everything on being part of it. Every tech giant today exists because they made a choice like the one Gates made in 1995. They saw a shift coming and went all in. The companies that don't exist anymore are the ones that saw the shift and decided to wait and see. CompuServe, AOL, Yahoo, MySpace, BlackBerry, Nokia. All of them saw the next wave coming. All of them made conservative choices to protect their existing businesses. All of them are gone or irrelevant now. Microsoft survived because Gates made the radical choice in 1995. They survived again because Nadella made another radical choice in 2014. The question isn't whether tech companies will face existential technology shifts. They will, constantly. The question is whether they'll make the choice to go all in when it happens. Most won't. It's too scary. The risks are too high. The critics are too loud. But the companies that do make that choice, the ones that follow the blueprint Gates created in 1995, those are the companies that define the next generation of technology. That's why the browser wars matter. Not because of browsers, which are boring infrastructure now, but because of the choice Gates made and what it taught every tech company that came after. When you see the future, you don't just adapt to it. You don't add it as a feature to your existing products. You rebuild your entire company around it. You give away what you have to give away. You spend what you have to spend. You move as fast as you have to move. And you accept that you might be wrong, you might lose everything, but the alternative is guaranteed irrelevance. That's the choice that built big tech. The choice to see what's coming and bet the company on it. Gates made it in 1995 with the internet. Every successful tech company since has made some version of the same choice. The ones that dominate the next decade will be the ones making that choice right now about AI or quantum computing or whatever comes next. The technology changes, the markets change. The companies change, but the choice stays the same. Go all in or fade away. There's a postscript to this story that's worth mentioning. In 2020, Microsoft announced that the original Edge browser, the one they built to replace Internet Explorer, was being discontinued. They were replacing it with a new Edge browser based on Chromium, Google's open-source browser engine. This means that Microsoft, the company that spent billions of dollars and years of effort to dominate the browser market, now builds their browser using technology created by their competitor. The browser that Gates said was essential to Microsoft's future is now fundamentally a Google product with Microsoft branding. Some people see this as an admission of defeat. Microsoft lost the browser wars so completely that they gave up trying to maintain their own browser technology. They're using Google's engine because they can't compete otherwise. But there's another way to look at it. Microsoft realized that the browser itself doesn't matter anymore. What matters is the services, the integration, the ecosystem. The underlying technology of how the browser renders web pages is just plumbing. Microsoft can use Google's plumbing and focus on building better features on top of it. This is the same logic that led Gates to give Internet Explorer away for free in 1995. The browser is just infrastructure. You make money on what the browser enables, not the browser itself. So if Google wants to maintain an open-source browser engine that anyone can use, Microsoft will use it and focus their resources on other things, like AI, like cloud services, like productivity tools. That's the final lesson of the browser wars. Today's strategic advantage is tomorrow's commodity. Today's crucial technology is tomorrow's boring infrastructure. The companies that win are the ones that know when to fight for control and when to let go and focus on the next battle. Microsoft fought for browser dominance because in 1995, that was the crucial battle. In 2020, it's not. So they stopped fighting and moved their resources to battles that matter now. That's harder than it sounds. Companies get emotionally attached to the wars they've won. Executives who built their careers on a particular technology don't want to admit it's obsolete. Organizations develop institutional memory and processes around their core products. Walking away from a market you dominated is psychologically difficult, even when it's strategically correct. But the companies that can do it, that can let go of yesterday's victories to focus on tomorrow's opportunities, those are the companies that survive long-term. Microsoft is one of the only first-generation tech giants still relevant today. Apple is the other. IBM is still around but not culturally significant. Everyone else from the 1980s and 1990s Digital Equipment Corporation, Sun Microsystems, Silicon Graphics, Compaq, Gateways gone or absorbed into other companies. Microsoft and Apple survived because they were willing to kill their own products. Apple killed the iPod with the iPhone. They killed headphone jacks. They killed physical keyboards on phones. They killed the old MacBooks for new designs. They're constantly walking away from things that work to build things that might work better. Microsoft killed DOSes for Windows. They killed Windows Mobile. They killed their old browser for a new one, then killed that one for a different new one. They killed their old CEO and brought in a new one with a completely different strategy. The willingness to walk away from success is what separates the companies that last from the companies that fade. And it all goes back to the choice Gates made in 1995, the choice to abandon Microsoft's existing strategy, to embrace the internet even though it meant cannibalizing their business model, to give away software for free, to declare war on Netscape and spend whatever it took to win. That choice worked. Microsoft dominated the desktop internet era. But more importantly, that choice taught Microsoft that they could reinvent themselves, that they could make radical pivots and survive. That organizational muscle, that willingness to burn down the old to build the new, is what allowed Microsoft to survive into the 2020s when most of their peers didn't. The browser wars weren't just about browsers. They were about establishing a pattern. When the world changes, you change faster. When a new technology threatens your business, you embrace it completely. When competitors emerge, you fight with everything you have. When your current products become obsolete, you build new ones. That pattern is now standard operating procedure in tech. But in 1995, it was revolutionary. Gates didn't just save Microsoft. He created the playbook that every tech company now follows. The companies that will dominate the 2030s are making similar choices right now. They're seeing the next wave: AI, spatial computing, quantum, biotech, whatever it is, and they're making the same bet Gates made in 1995. Go all in. Move fast. Cannibalize yourself before someone else does. Some of them will win. Most will fail. But the ones that don't even try, that protect their existing businesses and move cautiously, will definitely fail. That's the certainty Gates proved in 1995. In tech, the only thing more dangerous than moving too fast is not moving fast enough. The browser wars taught us that, and every generation of tech companies has had to relearn it. Because seeing the lesson and living the lesson are different things. It's easy to say you'll disrupt yourself when things are hypothetical. It's much harder when you have billions of dollars of revenue and thousands of employees depending on the current products. It's harder when Wall Street is telling you to focus on your core business. It's harder when your own executives are saying the new technology isn't ready yet. Gates did it anyway. He made the hard choice in 1995, and it saved Microsoft. Nadella made the hard choice in 2014, and it revitalized Microsoft. The next CEO will have to make another hard choice, probably soon. That's the job in tech. You're not managing a stable business. You're constantly deciding whether to blow up your own company before someone else does. The browser wars are ancient history now. Kids graduating college today weren't born when Internet Explorer launched. The technology is obsolete. The companies involved have all transformed into something unrecognizable. But the choice Gates made and what it taught us about how tech companies survive, that's still relevant. That'll be relevant as long as technology keeps changing, which means forever. The story of the browser wars has another layer that most people miss. While Gates was fighting Netscape, something else was happening inside Microsoft that would shape the tech industry for decades. The company was learning how to weaponize its platform in ways that went far beyond just bundling software. They were creating a playbook for platform dominance that companies like Apple, Google, and Amazon would later perfect. But Microsoft was the first to really understand what it meant to control a platform and use that control to win in adjacent markets. The key insight came from a guy named Paul Maritz, who ran the Windows platform division. Maritz understood something that even Gates initially missed. The browser wars weren't really about browsers. They were about who would control the application platform of the future. Let me explain what that means. In the 1990s, Windows was the application platform. If you wanted to build software that regular people would use, you built it for Windows. Not because Windows was technically superior, it wasn't, but because Windows was on 90% of computers. Developers built for Windows because that's where the users were. Users bought Windows computers because that's where the software was. This is called a network effect, and it's the most powerful force in technology. Once you have it, it's almost impossible to break. But Netscape was threatening this. Mark Andreessen, Netscape's co-founder, gave interviews saying that the browser would become the new platform. He said that in the future, applications would run inside the browser, not on Windows. You wouldn't need Windows anymore. You just need a computer that could run Netscape Navigator. The browser would be the operating system. This wasn't just trash talk. Netscape was actually building technology to make this happen. They were working with Sun Microsystems on something called Java, a programming language that let developers write applications that could run anywhere on any operating system, as long as you had a Java-capable browser. Write once, run anywhere. That was the promise. If it worked, Windows would become irrelevant. You could use a Mac, a Linux machine, even some weird alternative operating system. And as long as you had Netscape Navigator with Java support, you could run the same applications as everyone else. Microsoft would lose their platform monopoly. Everything they'd built over 15 years would evaporate. This is what made Gates physically sick when he started understanding the threat. It wasn't just that Netscape had a better browser. It was that Netscape was trying to turn the browser into a platform that would replace Windows, and they were succeeding. By 1996, lots of developers were experimenting with Java. Sun Microsystems was evangelizing it aggressively. Big companies like Oracle were building Java-based tools. The vision of the browser as platform was starting to feel real. Microsoft's response was comprehensive and ruthless. They didn't just build a better browser. They systematically attacked every piece of Netscape's strategy. First, they went after Java. Microsoft licensed Java from Sun and then modified it. They created their own version of Java that had special features that only worked on Windows. This defeated the whole point of Java, Developers who used Microsoft's Java tools would build applications that only ran on Windows, not anywhere. Sun sued Microsoft for violating the Java license. The lawsuit dragged on for years. Eventually, Microsoft had to pay Sun $1 billion in damages, but by then the damage was done. Java's momentum as a cross-platform solution was broken. Microsoft also built their own competing technology called ActiveX. It did similar things to Java, but was designed to work seamlessly with Internet Explorer and Windows. Microsoft pushed ActiveX hard to developers, offering free tools and support. The message was clear. If you're building web applications, use our technology, not Netscape's. Second, Microsoft went after Netscape's revenue model. Netscape made money selling their browser to businesses and selling server software. Microsoft gave away Internet Explorer and also gave away a competing web server called Internet Information Services. IIS came free with Windows NT Server. Netscape's server software cost thousands of dollars. Why would businesses pay for Netscape's server when Microsoft's was free and integrated better with Windows? Netscape's server business collapsed. By 1998, Microsoft had about 40% of the web server market. Apache, the free open-source server, had about 50%. Netscape had less than 10% of a market they'd pioneered. Third, Microsoft went after Netscape's partnerships. Netscape had deals with lots of companies to bundle Navigator with their products or services. Microsoft systematically offered better deals. They'd give companies free licenses to other Microsoft products if they dropped Netscape and promoted Internet Explorer instead. They threatened to withhold Windows support or favorable licensing terms if companies continued promoting Netscape. The antitrust trial revealed dozens of examples of this. Microsoft pressured Apple to make Internet Explorer the default browser on Macs. They pressured Intel to stop working on software that competed with Windows. They pressured Compaq to remove Netscape icons from new computers. Some of these tactics were legal. Some were questionable. Some were clearly anti-competitive. But all of them were effective. By 1998, Netscape was isolated. Their browser was losing market share. Their server business was dying. Their partnerships were falling apart. Their vision of the browser as platform was defeated. AOL bought them because Netscape still had valuable technology and talented engineers, but as an independent force in the industry, Netscape was finished. Microsoft had won through a combination of technical excellence, aggressive business tactics, and willingness to use their Windows monopoly as leverage. This became the template. When Microsoft saw a threat, they didn't just compete. They leveraged Windows to crush the competitor. They did this with media players competing against real networks. They did it with instant messaging competing against AOL. They did it with document formats competing against Adobe. They tried to do it with search, competing against Google. But that didn't work because Google wasn't threatening Windows directly. The pattern was consistent. Identify the threat. Build a competing product. Give it away for free or bundle it with Windows. Use Windows market dominance to force adoption. Starve the competitor of oxygen until they died or sold themselves. This playbook worked great until it didn't. The problem was that Microsoft became so focused on protecting Windows that they missed the threats that didn't come through Windows. Google didn't need Windows. They ran on web servers and people accessed them through browsers. It didn't matter if you used Windows, Mac, or Linux. Google worked the same. Microsoft tried to compete with MSN Search and later Bing, but they couldn't leverage Windows to win. Search didn't depend on the operating system. Facebook didn't need Windows. Social networking ran in the browser. Microsoft had no leverage. They tried to build competing social networks, remember Windows Live Spaces? But failed completely. The iPhone didn't need Windows. Apple built their own operating system for mobile. Microsoft tried to compete with Windows Mobile and Windows Phone, but they had no leverage in a market where they didn't control the platform. For the first time, Microsoft was competing on equal terms with other companies, and they discovered they weren't very good at it. Turns out that building great products is harder when you cut and force them on people through bundling and platform control. This is the real lesson of the browser wars. Microsoft won by leveraging their platform monopoly. But that same strategy made them dependent on Windows remaining relevant. When computing shifted to areas where Windows didn't matter, web services, mobile, social, Microsoft struggled. The platform dominance that saved them in the 1990s trapped them in the 2000s. Other companies learned from this. Apple looked at what Microsoft did with Windows and said, We can do that better. They build iOS as a completely controlled platform. Every app goes through Apple's App Store. Apple takes 30% of all revenue. They control what apps can do, how they look, what features they can access. It's even more controlled than Windows ever was. And it works because iOS is on a billion devices and developers have no choice but to accept Apple has terms if they want access to those users. That's the browser wars playbook perfected. Google looked at what Microsoft did and said, we need to make sure nobody does that to us. So they built Android and gave it away for free to phone manufacturers. Why? Because they needed to ensure that mobile devices could access Google services. They didn't need to control the platform the way Apple does. They just needed to make sure no one else controlled it and locked Google out. That's defensive platform strategy. Learn from watching Microsoft almost kill Netscape. Amazon looked at what Microsoft did with bundling products and said, we can apply that to services. They built AWS and bundled all sorts of services together. You want cloud computing? Great, here's servers, databases, storage, networking, AI tools, everything. All integrated, all working together seamlessly. Switch to a competitor and nothing works as smoothly. That's platform lock-in, learn from the Windows era. Every major tech company today uses some version of Microsoft's browser wars strategy. Build or buy a platform. Lock users into that platform through integration and convenience. Use platform dominance to win in adjacent markets. Defend the platform aggressively against any threat. The difference is that today's platforms are more sophisticated. They're not just operating systems. They're ecosystems of devices, services, and data that work together in ways that make it painful to leave. Apple has your iPhone, your iPad, your Mac, your AirPods, your iCloud data, your purchased apps and media. Switching to Android means abandoning all of that. Google has your email, your documents, your photos, your search history, your YouTube subscriptions, your location data. Switching to alternatives means rebuilding your digital life from scratch. Amazon has your purchase history, your payment information, your shipping addresses, your Prime membership, your Alexa devices. Switching means losing convenience you've come to depend on. These companies learned from Microsoft that platforms are everything. But they also learned from Microsoft's failures. They learned not to be too dependent on any single platform. They learned to be more subtle about leverage. They learned to make lock-in feel like convenience rather than coercion. And they learned to move faster when threats emerge. Microsoft spent 2 years denying the internet mattered. That kind of delay would be fatal today. The pace of technological change has accelerated. Companies that wait even 6 months to respond to threats can find themselves irreversibly behind. This brings us back to AI and why the current moment looks so much like 1995. Every major tech company sees AI as a potential platform shift. Just like the internet threatened to make Windows irrelevant, AI threatens to make search, social media, maybe even smartphones less important. If AI assistants can answer questions, create content, write code, and help with tasks, do you need to browse websites? Do you need to scroll through social feeds? Do you need apps for everything? Maybe the AI becomes the interface to everything digital. That's the platform shift. And just like with browsers, whoever controls the AI layer might control access to everything else. That's why every company is racing to build AI products and give them away for free or cheap. OpenAI with ChatGPT, Google with Gemini, Microsoft with Copilot, Anthropic with Claude, Meta with Llama. They're not making money on these products yet. Some of them are losing enormous amounts of money. OpenAI reportedly loses money on every ChatGPT conversation because the computing costs are so high. But none of them care about short-term profitability. They're all following the browser wars playbook. Give away the thing users touch. Build market share as fast as possible. Establish your technology as the standard. Make money later on the infrastructure and services. Microsoft is especially aggressive because they've lived through this before. They invested $10 billion in OpenAI. They integrated ChatGPT into Bing, into Office, into Windows, into every product they make. They're trying to do to Google what they did to Netscape. Use AI to make search less relevant. Make the AI assistant the primary way people access information. Leverage their existing products to force adoption. Google is panicking the way Netscape panicked. Search is their core business. If AI assistants replace search, Google loses its primary revenue source. They rushed out Bard, which wasn't ready and got mocked for giving wrong answers in the demo. They're retrofitting AI into search even though it might cannibalize their ad revenue. They have no choice. It's adapt or die. Apple is being more cautious, which is either smart or dangerous depending on how things play out. They're not rushing out AI products. They're waiting to see what works and then they'll integrate it into their ecosystem in a polished way. This worked for them with smartphones. They weren't first, but they built the best product. It might work with AI, or they might wait too long and find themselves locked out of the next platform. The next few years will determine which companies dominate the 2030s, just like the browser wars determined which companies dominated the 2000s and 2010s, and it all comes back to the choice Gates made in 1995. See the shift. Go all in, move faster than seems possible, give away what you have to give away. Use every advantage you have. Ignore critics who say you're moving too fast or spending too much, because the cost of moving too slowly is extinction. That's the choice that built big tech. It's the choice that will build whatever comes next. And it's the choice that separates companies that shape the future from companies that get shaped by it. The browser wars were 30 years ago. The technology is obsolete. The companies have transformed. But the pattern remains. Technology shifts. Platforms rise and fall. Companies that see it coming and bet everything survive. Companies that don't disappear. We're watching it happen again right now with AI, same pattern, different technology. Some companies will make the right choice and dominate the next era. Some will make the wrong choice and fade away. And 20 years from now, someone will write about the AI wars the way we write about the browser wars. They'll talk about the companies that saw it coming and went all in. They'll talk about the companies that hesitated and lost. They'll analyze the strategic choices and the pivotal moments, and they'll probably miss the most important point. The same point people miss about the browser wars. It's not about the technology. It's never about the technology. It's about the choice. Do you see the future and commit everything to it? Or do you protect the present and hope the future takes care of itself? That's the only question that matters. Gates answered it in 1995. His answer saved Microsoft and created the modern tech industry. The leaders making choices today about AI are answering the same question. Their answers will determine what tech looks like in 2040. But the question never changes. See the future. Bet everything on it. Accept that you might be wrong, but know that not betting guarantees you're relevant. That's the choice. That's always been the choice. That's what the browser wars taught us. Everything else is just details. Click the next video to see how this same pattern played out with smartphones.